Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Spectator Sports. This is Sebastian Fonseca. Today we're going to break down all the amazing action across Championship Sunday. But before we get into it, please like and subscribe. It makes a massive difference in the YouTube algorithm. And also take a look at our Instagram and TikTok pages. And don't forget, the audio from today's podcast will be on Spotify. All links are in the description. Coming into this game, I thought that this was going to be an all-out heavyweight boxing match. We were going to get a highly potent offense against a stout defense. Getting to see these two titans go head-to-head. And early on, it was advantage Eagles. The Eagles drove right down the field. Now, they did get the benefit of a missed call on that deep pass to Devontae Smith that definitely looked incomplete upon further analysis, but they didn't call it, and they went down the field and scored a touchdown on the opening drive, putting the Niners in an early 7-0 hole. And Brock Purdy, on basically his first pass attempt of the game, a great pass rush by Hassan Reddick. He was able to force a fumble, and on the release, there was just so much force coming into Brock Purdy's elbow. There was something wrong in that joint. I don't know if it's a ligament tear or there was some nerve damage. Apparently he didn't have feeling or the grip strength to hold on to the ball. So that meant that Brock Purdy was out of this game from a very early stretch. And when that happens, especially this late in your postseason run, that throws out your entire game plan. And I feel awful for the 49ers to come this far, and that means that your team has to resort to Josh Johnson. No disrespect to Josh Johnson. He's been a journeyman quarterback for the better part of his career, and then he was knocked out later in this game due to a concussion, so then that meant that we had to go back to Brock Purdy dinking and dunking, and then using Christian McCaffrey as a wildcat quarterback. He got a chance to throw the ball a couple of times, and then it was just like reverse option run play. I mean, there was basically no offense for the 49ers at this point. Their defense played amazing in that first half. I mean, they were able to make a lot of adjustments. They forced the Eagles to punt on 2 or 3 consecutive possessions, and after tying up the game, I mean, this is 7-7. Christian McCaffrey reeled off an amazing run, showing off the strength and bouncing off tackles. Me, as an Eagles fan coming into this, I was really disappointed. And also, I mean, I was just a little worried. That confidence, that energy can catch fire. Next thing you know, the defense could force a turnover, and then the short field again, they cash in, and then off the races. The offense was able to shut that down very quickly. They had a nice methodical drive. Now, they did benefit through a lot of 49er penalties that we'll talk about later, because the 49ers, as the game continued to wear on, they started to lack that composure that they had for the better part of this season. Towards the end of the first half, they allowed a touchdown drive to the Eagles to get that lead back up to 14-7. And then on the next offensive series, we had an interesting sequence where you have 3 timeouts and a minute 36. And I think when you have a guy like Brock Purdy, or a quarterback that you've been comfortable with for a significant amount of time, you'd go for a quick score, a field goal, just to get some points up on the board, especially when you're having the second half kickoff too. That's a huge chance to steal some points before halftime. But I would just check and see what the offense feels under Josh Johnson. And they did get that nice completion on that first down. But after that, he fumbled the snap, and then it was recovered by Hassan Reddick. And then the Eagles cashed in for another touchdown. And that was pretty much it. We have to talk about the MVP of this game is Hassan Reddick. He wrecked the game from the jump. I mean, knocking out the opposing starting quarterback, it's absolutely not a goal. I mean, the goal isn't to hurt or injure players and cause harm to them, but the fact that you can benefit from having a second stringer, or therefore the fourth stringer essentially in this entire season, taking snaps in a championship game on the road is pretty much sealing the deal for your team. And I mean, he had 2 sacks, a fumble recovery, just was a menace. And I think this whole season, Reddick has been overlooked. Obviously, he hasn't had the season like Nick Bosa in terms of leading the league in sacks, but he forced a ton of fumbles this year. You look at the stats, he forced several fumbles this year. And also, I mean, in terms of him stacking up against Micah Parsons, you could definitely have a case that he should have been that first team All-Pro on the opposite side of Nick Bosa. Some other observations from this game: Jalen Hurts had another quiet game. I mean, mostly the damage was done through his legs. He had a rushing touchdown, and the drive in the second half that really put the game out of reach, where he had a nice set of runs. I did see him wince in pain. He's still dealing with that SC joint sprain that he suffered a month ago, so that's probably going to linger with him all the way up to the Super Bowl. He suffered a nasty personal foul by Hufanga, and I thought that was absolutely classic. And this is what I was talking about with the 49ers. As great as their defense was throughout the entirety of this season, when they started to get unraveled, they just completely fell apart. They had so many bad fouls that were just poorly timed. I mean, these are third down penalties resulting in automatic first downs. I remember a key play by Dre Greenlaw that he had Boston Scott for a loss of 3 yards on the play, but he had a face mask penalty that resulted in a first down. And I mean, talk about Hufanga and that personal foul that basically set them up with a first and goal that they cashed in, and that was basically it. Later in this game, we did see another dust up, and these two teams have had some jawing early on. We saw Ward and AJ Brown get into a little bit of a dust up in pregame warmups. We saw Trent Williams throw down Kayvon Wallace, and I mean, I understand you had better expectations for this game and things aren't going your way. You still have to show some class. Lose with honor and dignity. Don't go out a sore loser like this. The Eagles are moving on to their second Super Bowl in 5 years, and they've had a pretty easy run so far, not facing a lot of competition. I mean, the way the bracket shaked out, they've outscored their opponents 69-14, only allowing a touchdown in each game. And I mean, the pass rush is certainly getting there, and I'm really excited to see what this Eagles team can do in Arizona in 2 weeks. Just when you think you can doubt a guy like Patrick Mahomes, he's coming into this game with a high ankle sprain, just looking very gimpy. A lot of talk throughout the week about his opponent being the Cincinnati Bengals, who recently had his number, and he comes up with a truly gutsy performance, doing it all mostly from the pocket, where he was 9 out of 13 for 85 yards, including an amazing touchdown pass that just was out of the hands of Mike Hilton for a touchdown to MVS to put his team ahead at that point in the time. And also to talk about the amazing scramble play to set up the game-winning field goal attempt. I mean, he laid it all out on the line. He was able to dive. He took the late hit out of bounds, sacrificing his body. That is just so impressive on Mahomes' part. We have to talk about just how there's a huge gap between Mahomes and the other quarterbacks. We're so quick to take a guy like Mahomes for granted, where he has just created so much hype, and rightfully so, with the amount of success he's had early on in his career. 5 straight AFC Championship game appearances, all at home, 3 Super Bowl appearances, and an MVP, a Super Bowl ring, Super Bowl MVP. The list just goes on and on. He is definitely hands down the best quarterback in this league. And there are definitely challengers for that claim. There is still a sizable gap between him and any other challengers for that title of best quarterback in the NFL. For the Bengals, we have to talk about their O-line woes. I think this game really proved that those injuries can catch up to them. The Bills' defensive line was completely toothless post Von Miller. This time around, the Chiefs have a guy named Chris Jones, and I talked about in the preview video that he could wreck the game, especially from getting pressure up the middle, and that's exactly what happened. He had 2 sacks. The second one was really damaging for the Cincinnati Bengals when they had a chance to at least possess the ball, and whether or not they could get it into field goal range, they would at least deny the Chiefs an extra possession as the game was waning. And they just couldn't protect Burrow for much of that first half. This led to the Chiefs getting out to an early lead of 13-3. Now it was 13-6 at halftime, and the Bengals made some adjustments at halftime, but it was too little too late for the Bengals. Burrow himself, we can talk about the O-line play, but he definitely wasn't at his best. I think the 2 interceptions, if we want to dissect them, the first one is definitely on him just being hurried up. That clock is sped up and he just made a poor throw. The second one was definitely a great play between 2 Chiefs defensive backs. It was kind of like a team interception, so I can't totally fault him for that, but still, overall, Burrow definitely did not have the better of the games between him and Mahomes. We have to also give some credit to Marquez Valdes-Scantling. He was an offseason signing from the Green Bay Packers. He didn't have the best of seasons. It was a solid season, but I think we expected more from a guy like him. He showed up with a great game in the AFC Championship with over 100 yards receiving and that clutch touchdown in the third quarter. This game seemed perfectly scripted to go into overtime, but unfortunately Joseph Osai was trying to make that play, and just wasn't being smart in the moment. He pushed Mahomes where he was definitely at least a yard out of bounds, and that sent the Chiefs into field goal range. Bucker did the rest, and the Chiefs are moving on to the Super Bowl for the third time in 5 years. We can definitely talk about that this was an incredibly stupid play by Osai, but I think he well knows that. He is beating himself up on that. We saw his teammates really hold him up, except Jermaine Pratt came out in the locker room talking about how that was just a really bad play. He talked about in the comments that he was in the heat of the moment, and these things happen just when you're raw. I also understand it. I understand the split-second decision that Osai had to make. You think that a guy like Mahomes could cut upfield, and then you have to get him out of bounds. These are all split-second decisions, and it's very easy for us as fans to just come out and say, that was a stupid play, this guy should be cut, or that was insensitive of Pratt to go and say that. There are a lot of things that we say and do in the heat of the moment. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, and I think the biggest thing is that they're not intentional. I don't think Osai was intending to cause this bad personal foul penalty to put his team at risk of on the brink of elimination, and I don't think that Pratt also was trying to call out Osai in that moment. He did come back and apologize for that. It's just not a good look on Pratt's part, but I do think that all of these are just super raw in the moment, quick on your feet, and we sometimes don't do the best in those situations. It's just really unfortunate to see that this game didn't get the overtime period that I think it deserved. But the Bengals, they really have themselves to blame for this. I mean, they just didn't take advantage of moments in this game. They gave the Chiefs so much bulletin board material about Burrowhead Stadium. They talked a lot of trash, which is fine, but you have to back it up on the field. Otherwise, you just look like a fool. Mahomes heard all of that, and you got to think about those moments back in the day, like Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant. They read these newspaper clippings. They listen to the chatter, the chirping, and that is sometimes the worst thing you can do when you allow these great players extra motivation. They can channel that in from the depths that other players just don't have. I think it just goes to show that the Chiefs are truly the class of the AFC, and until somebody can really uproot them for a consistent multiple postseason runs, we still have to give the Chiefs as the favorites of the AFC to make the Super Bowl. And now we have a really nice matchup between the Kelceys, Jason Kelce, Travis Kelce. We also see Andy Reid coaching against his former team in the Philadelphia Eagles, so I'm going to break that down with a more detailed Super Bowl preview video in my next podcast. So to bring up some news about the Dallas Cowboys, they've done some shuffling in their coaching room. So we know that Kellen Moore is now parting ways with the Cowboys. He's going to be taking a job to be the LA Chargers OC. It's going to be interesting to see now what he can do with a guy like Justin Herbert and see if that team can really make some adjustments that they lacked this season in terms of not really having balance in the running attack and also just trying to be not so Herbert dependent. But to talk further in detail about the Cowboys, I mean, this is basically Mike McCarthy's last stand. If the Cowboys get off to a poor start and Dak is struggling, they can't do anything about Dak. They have this contract, so the easiest thing to eliminate is Mike McCarthy. And I think the guy that could definitely take up that role as the new coach would be Dan Quinn. I thought it was a great move that he decided to withdraw his name from head coaching consideration. There are a lot of interesting gigs, but I mean, to be the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, given that your head coach is already on thin ice, he could just inherit the same franchise. That is a very smart move for Dan Quinn. The Cowboys definitely have a very pivotal offseason coming up. They have a lot of free agents. They have to make some adjustments on the offensive side. And we get to see now, was this really Kellen Moore or was this Dak Prescott's regression? I think we might see a little bit of both, to be honest, and that might further skew the whole debate whether Dak is a guy or is he an elite guy or if it's really just the coaching staff around him. But we did see that he also wasn't the best of quarterbacks with Jason Garrett, so he definitely has a big sample size with different head coaches. It's going to be really interesting to see what the Cowboys will do moving forward for 2023. We got a video from Tom Brady's social media announcing his retirement from the NFL, and this time it feels a lot more permanent. Last year, he obviously came out with that letter announcing his retirement and he was going to be stepping away, but he came back after 40 days and we lived through this tumultuous year with Tom Brady. I mean, the personal life issues, the issues on the field with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and it was a long season for him. But after seeing that wild card loss to the Dallas Cowboys, you could definitely see that that wasn't the same Tom Brady. He didn't want to get hit. He was missing throws, and like we said, it's been a long year with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2022. I do think that if he wanted to return, there was options and greener pastures like the San Francisco 49ers, given that that's his hometown. He grew up in San Mateo, and there always been a quarterback away in that Kyle Shanahan system. But apparently in this reports that it was really Tampa Bay or retirement, and he decided to choose the latter. There could be a chance he could come back, but like I said, it definitely feels more permanent. So we have to reflect on just all the amazing accolades that he's had. He's going to go down as the greatest quarterback of all time. 7 Super Bowl wins, 5 Super Bowl MVPs, a bevy of records across the NFL record books, including for a quarterback or players. And just the amount of longevity he was able to sustain is truly unbelievable. So hats off to Tom Brady. It was a pleasure to root against you and root for you during your long storied career. It's going to be interesting to see about this color commentary role that he'll have coming up with Fox Sports. Last week in the NBA was rivalry week, and it was capped off between a matchup between the historic longtime rivals in the LA Lakers visiting the Boston Celtics. We know all the history about these two teams. They met up for countless finals in the past. We got to see a really good matchup between these two teams. The Lakers were in control for most of this game, but as the game continued to wear on, the Celtics started to get back in the game. It was tied. In the waning seconds of regulation, LeBron was driving to the rim. He was going up for a layup with his left hand, and clearly it was hacked. I couldn't see it on the original broadcast, but on replay, you could see Jason Tatum got him on the follow-through for that block attempt, but no call was made. It was blatantly missed. The Lakers ended up losing the game. Now, I don't think that was the only reason why they lost. There were multiple plays in that blown lead that caused the Lakers to lose this game. So it's not strictly on that play, but to deprive them of that chance to at least attempt the free throws to end the game in regulation is definitely a big mess up on the NBA. We have replay in so many different avenues, and we just are not tapping into its fullest potential. They're just only limiting coaches to one challenge per game, and there are just so many things that they could go and review, because even though there wasn't a foul called on the court, they can't have the power to go back and review it. And I think that's really where the NBA is missing the ball here. And when these calls are missed, these refs need to be held accountable. We saw Pat Beverly. I mean, he is probably one of the greatest trolls of this league, and he brought a camera to the head referee showing the replay about the missed call, and he earned a technical foul. That's probably the best ways to earn a technical foul. I love that. Well worth the trouble. And I mean, so what? The refs got his feelings hurt? Or players and coaches can't criticize NBA referees? This is also across the other leagues too. Why are we protecting referees? They're just people like you and me. They can be subject to criticism. So just because you criticize a call, yes, they're human, they can make mistakes, but when you make those big mistakes, you should also be held accountable. So you deserve that criticism as well. I mean, just because a player misses a free throw, we can criticize them. The media can do that, but I also think since the players are actually the ones that are directly impacted by these calls, they should also have the power and say to criticize these referees. So I think there has to be a way to really hold these referees accountable. The NBA can do whatever they want in terms of at least removing them from playoff series. That's one thing, but I think one thing they have to do is maybe look into fining or even removing referees that miss these type of calls, because they come back later the next day, they have those reports. Those reports don't make a direct impact on the game. So the NBA needs to do a better job in getting the correct calls on the court and expanding replay to its fullest capability. So that's it for this episode of Spectator Sports. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. We're going to be having a preview of the Super Bowl coming up next week to analyze and break down all the matchups between the Chiefs and Eagles. And until next time, I'll see you then.